These are the words uttered by Wiz on September the 19th of 2017. It's now more than a year since this particular message went out, and Wiz has been working on Stellaris since the 8th of June of 2016, at least in his current role. Does this statement still reflect on the current state of affairs now that 2.2 is coming out, now that MegaCorp is coming out? We've had several expansions since Wiz came on board: Leviathans, Utopia, Synthetic Dawn, Apocalypse, Distant Stars, and of course now MegaCorp. And in this particular review, we're going to be talking about MegaCorp in particular, and also take a little bit of a look at whether or not it is any good, and most importantly, is it worth your money? I want to preface this particular video with the following, and that is that MegaCorp and 2.2 Leguin, the economic overhaul, pretty much go hand in hand. There's a lot of overlap between systems. MegaCorp would not exist unless 2.2 would be developed in the way it was, with the completely and total overhaul of the economic system. And it pretty much feels like an expansion on that new economy system. Now, obviously it's $20. And the real question is the amount of content that we're getting in the MegaCorp expansions, which is definitely a major expansion together with Utopia and Apocalypse, is it worth your money? Well, let's take a look first. So in my personal opinion, one of the big ones for this one is the corporate authority, which is the mega corporations. It adds a new authority type similar to the Synthetic Dawn and mechanical species, as well as the hive minds that were added in Utopia. There is a relatively large amount of new civics available for corporations, and they can be played in various cool ways. In addition to that, they have their own little branch offices that they can put out there. And it does make for complete unique gameplay. Here's the thing. When was the last time you played as a mechanical species? So you've picked up Synthetic Dawn and you're like, yes, I'm going to play as a mechanical species. How many times after that have you played as a mechanical species? For me, it can be counted on one hand, and obviously you're still encountering these species on the map in various ways and their mechanics still apply. But with corporations, do you really expect that you're going to be playing them multiple times? If so, then this is definitely something for you. And there is hundreds of hours of gameplay here just from this corporate authority. But is it really something that you're going to be spending quite a lot of time on? For instance, another example of this would be the Republic for Crusader Kings 2. If you have Crusader Kings 2 and you own the Republic, how often do you play with Republics? Sure, they give you bonuses in some sorts, which by itself is rather useful, but do you really play as them? It's a lot of spicing up of the existing scenario, and to get back towards the quote of making Stellaris the best and most engrossing Space 4X to ever exist, and I think with my amazing team this can be done. Does this fit within the scope? Within sci-fi, obviously we've got things like Weyland-Yutani, the Tyrell Corporation, and other mega corporations that are out in space doing their own thing. And adding this, I actually think that Corporate Authority are an interesting addition that could make your gameplay a lot more interesting, but it's still kind of in the same category as the synthetic species of Synthetic Dawn, which you kind of have limited play with unless you specifically focus on that, which is interesting. Second off, there is the Ecumenopolis. So the Ecumenopolis, for those of you who don't know, that is a gigantic city world. It's a planet covered by a city which can be a economic powerhouse within your empire. To a certain extent, this could be considered an expansion on the mega structures, which we're going to be talking about in a little bit as well. But overall, considering the changes of 2.2 that are going to be introduced or have been introduced by now, the Ecumenopolis would not have been possible, and this is once again an extension of a new existing system, something that we're consistently seeing with Paradox and specifically Stellaris expansions, which by itself is fine. Ecumenopolis and all those sort of style buildings are fine. And if this is something that you're looking to bring into your game, then yeah, this is a great little addition for this particular pack. It is a little bit standalone-y, though. It does have a certain amount of impact, but you're effectively only going to be really building one. Then there's the Caravaneers. Now, the Caravaneers by themselves are kind of curious. I did a little bit of a stream before release, which was basically taking a look at the effects that the slot machines have. Basically, the Caravaneers, with a little bit of look back on that. They have two options. You can get loot boxes, which are inserted for comedy's sake, but do actually give you very tangible pros and cons as well. But the slots that have been added initially seem to be a little bit broken, and the devs have already addressed all of this stuff. Where that if you play the slot machines over at the Caravaneers, they will basically in the long run be a loss. But overall, the Caravaneers by themselves are pretty much the #1 most fleshed out item in this expansion itself, which by itself is kind of weird because it's very similar to the Leviathans update where we had the various space stations that would give you resources, which was literally the only reason why you would want to get Leviathans back then, because the giant space aliens by themselves were cool, but from a gameplay point of view, they didn't really add all that much rather than being a mini bus to be overcome. In this particular case, the Caravaneers, they're flying around in their space fleets and basically give you the opportunity to buy stuff. Now that by itself, there is a lot of stuff that you can buy, and they all give bonuses, and you need to make decisions, and they're all a little bit quirky. The thing is, they can come in at rather weird times, and they're basically coming in saying, hey, by the way, you want to buy this, and then it takes time for them to cycle through, and there's free fleets, so over time, more and more will come over, and it can be a huge boon for your empire, which is kind of cool, but it can also be negative, which is also kind of cool. But yeah, Caravaneers by themselves, I actually feel are by far some of the most fleshed out items in this particular expansion, and are probably the #1 reason why you would want to get this expansion, because the sheer amount of bonuses that you can get out of them is pretty huge, and as well the storyline elements that you can get out of them, that's great as well. Sci-fi is after all a canvas. You write your own story, and the Caravaneers I give you additional paint to write that story, and that right there is something that I find amazing. Then there's the Galactic slave market, and this of course comes with the caveat of they're just pixels, they're not actually slaves, but the consequences will never be the same. You can effectively have a eugenics program on your planet to breed the perfect slave and then sell them on the market for profit. There's some moral quandaries there, which by itself, on one hand, are kind of terrible, but on the other hand, are kind of hilarious, especially if we mix this up with the new xenocompatibility ascension perk, which makes that you can, well, crossbreed different species. This expansion is all over the place in terms of particular content. The xenocompatibility is a good example of that. It kind of does tie into the slave market, but yeah, it's cool. It gives slavers a lot more meat, I would say. Slaves have been, I feel, a feature that has been very underdeveloped within the game until this point, and thankfully 2.2 is making that a lot better. But still, the Galactic slave market, yeah, it's a new avenue of profit, which fits perfectly within the MegaCorp concept. Now let's talk about a little bit about the additional Ascension perks. On the marketing sheet for this particular game, it's like all new Ascension perks. There is effectively two. There is effectively two. There is the Arcology project, which I'm not going to count because it's part of the Ecumenopolis. You need it in order to get it. There is xenocompatibility, which is a hilarious mixture of you can crossbreed species. And then there is a singular corporate authority ascension perk, which is the universal transactions. And basically what it does is it makes your trade deals cheaper. Overall, the ascension perks in this particular expansions are not all that much to write home about, which by itself is a little bit disappointing, I would say, considering the price point of this particular expansion, but still. Then we get to the thing that, well, so the megastructures. The megastructures what they do is cool. The matter decompressor, it's the antithesis of the Dyson sphere from Utopia. It generates minerals. Fair. That's fine. Now it's a giant laser drill into a black hole. Sure, I'm not gonna I'm gonna fuss about the physics. It's effectively space fantasy at this point anyway because of the shroud. However, the mega art installation in the diplomatic center, whilst their output are cool, are visually unimpressive, I would say. Especially the mega art installation, which basically consists of 3 hockey pucks in space, is a little bit understated, to say the least. The strategic coordination center is fine. It's visually, I'm building something big. The Dyson sphere, as well as the science nexus, as well as the sentry array, they are relatively imposing structures. Some of the new mega structures within the game are not particularly visually appealing, I would say. Sure, their output is great, but it does feel like this was a little bit tacked on at the last possible moment to justify the price point. I could be completely wrong by this, by the way, whether or not this was part of the original thing, because mega structures have been in demand by the community ever since Utopia came out, basically to get new expansion, new mega structures. But yeah, it does feel a little bit tacked on just to, yeah, like I mentioned, justify the $20 and or local equivalent for this game. Still, yeah, MegaCorp. I've actually been standing on the balcony just thinking about what I should rate this game as. Is it as good as Apocalypse and Utopia? Arguable. I still feel it is probably one of the weaker, larger expansions. Still, sure, it adds to corporate authority, but Utopia added hive minds. Monopolis is cool. Caravaneers are cool. Mega structures feels a little bit tacked on. The Galactic slave market adds the potential for all sorts of cruelty and hilarity. And the ascension perks are just a little bit underwhelming. So the real question is here, just to loop back towards the Twitter message from the 19th of September 2017. Is Stellaris moving into that direction of being the best, most engrossing Space 4X game to ever exist? It's been 2 years since the game came out. Considering how much it's been selling, I would expect that we're going to see more. And MegaCorp does, yes, in fact, add to that vision of turning Stellaris into the best and most engrossing Space 4X game to ever exist. Now, the real question then is, should you buy this? If you feel that you want to have an authority for corporate authority, you want to eco-monopolist, you want to have the Galactic slave market, and especially Caravaneers, which I personally think is the best addition to add in this expansion, then yes, go and pick it up for €20 and or your local equivalent. If not, just wait on a sale and have some fun or play on a multiplayer game with some friends that have the expansion, because whoever hosts a multiplayer game that owns MegaCorp, you'll be able to play with the features therein, which I think is a great way of testing out games, and you should try to find a couple of friends or jump on the various multiplayer discords and basically try it out for yourselves. I can only give you my opinion. If you have any additional comments, feel free to add them below when it comes to MegaCorp. We're going to go and wrap it up here. And until next time, take good care of yourselves and, as always, each other.